Human accepted an alien slave as payment, only to discover she was a wealthy princess. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. James Carter was just an ordinary guy. He lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, had a dead-end job at a tech support company, and spent most of his nights browsing online forums or playing video games. He was what you'd call middle class, not rich, not poor, just scraping by. But everything changed the day he got an email he couldn't ignore. The subject line was simple, almost too simple, your chance to change everything. Intrigued, James opened it. It was from someone called A. Zarath. The email offered him a unique opportunity, a chance to receive something extraordinary in exchange for a very modest sum. The email claimed that James could become a partner in a groundbreaking intergalactic trade agreement. At first, it sounded like a scam, but something about it pulled at him. Perhaps it was his desperation for something different, or maybe he was just curious. The email promised him an alien artifact, a gift that would change his life. It didn't specify much, just that he'd have to meet a representative in person and provide a small payment. It seemed too good to be true, but James figured, what do I have to lose? So, he followed the instructions and traveled to an inconspicuous building on the edge of town. It didn't look like much from the outside, just a gray building tucked between two old factories. As he walked in, a man dressed in a dark suit greeted him. Without a word, the man led James down a hallway and into a small room where a figure stood waiting. At first glance, she appeared to be a young woman, but something about her didn't seem quite human. Her skin was an odd shade of blue, almost shimmering, like it was made of stardust. She had long, silver hair that seemed to glow in the dim light. The man introduced her as Aliana, though he didn't say much else. Without any formal greeting, Aliana extended her hand to James, offering him a small device. She didn't speak, but the message was clear, this was his payment. He was supposed to accept her as part of the deal. With a slight hesitation, James took the device, not fully understanding what it was or what was going on. Aliana's eyes locked onto his, her expression unreadable. As he took her hand, he felt an odd sensation, a sudden rush of warmth that seemed to flood his body. It was as though she was transferring something to him, though he didn't know what. The man handed James a small piece of paper with instructions on how to handle Aliana. She is yours now, the man said coldly. You may do with her as you see fit. James didn't understand. What did that even mean? Was she some kind of slave? The idea of having an alien slave seemed ridiculous, but for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt compelled to accept the situation. Little did he know, this decision would lead him down a path he could never have imagined. James stared at Aliana as she stood there, motionless, her eyes locked on his. She didn't seem like someone who had just been given to him as part of some trade deal. In fact, she looked almost regal, as though she was accustomed to power, not submission. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She wasn't acting like a slave, not in the way he'd imagined. Her demeanor was calm, almost serene, and her posture was impeccable, like a queen waiting for her next command. He shifted uneasily, unsure of what to do next. What am I supposed to do with you? He asked awkwardly, trying to break the silence. Aliana didn't answer. Instead, she reached out with a slow, graceful motion, placing a small, glowing object into his hand. The sensation of warmth flooded over him again, stronger this time, as if the object held some kind of energy. He looked down at it, perplexed. It was a delicate piece of technology, but it felt ancient, as though it had been crafted by hands far beyond what Earth could produce. James had no idea what to make of it, but Aliana's gaze was unwavering, her eyes full of silent expectation. "Why are you here?" he asked, more to himself than to her. She still didn't speak, but he felt the strange pull of her presence. It was as though her very being was trying to communicate something without words. It was unnerving, yet oddly comforting. James didn't know what to think. He had expected to receive an alien artifact of some kind, not this. He didn't know how to handle the situation. Aliana, however, remained calm, her face unreadable, as if she were waiting for something. The air in the room seemed to thicken with an invisible pressure, and James felt an unsettling sense of being watched, not just by Aliana, but by something else. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice a little softer this time. Aliana didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into the folds of her strange, shimmering clothing and produced a small device. It was sleek and metallic, with markings that James couldn't understand. She pressed a button on the device, and suddenly, the room filled with a soft hum, as if the walls themselves were alive with energy. James looked around, his heart racing. "What is this?" he asked, panic creeping into his voice. Aliana still didn't speak, but she pointed to the object in his hand, the glowing piece of technology. She then looked at him, her gaze steady, as if urging him to understand. The feeling in the room was almost tangible now, something big was happening, but James couldn't quite grasp it. He glanced back at the small device in his hand, its glow pulsating gently. He felt an odd sense of connection, like it was meant for him, like it had been waiting for him to hold it. "What do you want me to do with this?" he asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. This time, Aliana's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, though her eyes remained distant. The moment felt like a beginning, though James couldn't tell what kind of beginning it was. The weight of the situation settled on him, heavier than any burden he had ever known. It was as if he were standing on the edge of something vast and unknown, and Aliana was the only guide he had. He still didn't understand who she was or what this was all about, but the sense of urgency in the air told him that he had to find out, and soon. Aliana moved slightly, taking a step closer to him. The room seemed to shift with her movement, the hum of energy intensifying. James wasn't sure what was happening, but one thing was clear, his life was no longer ordinary. He had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. James felt a chill run down his spine as Aliana took a step closer. The air in the room seemed to grow denser, heavier, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer in control. Aliana stood before him, her expression still unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something that made him feel as though she was silently assessing him, weighing him as if he were nothing more than a puzzle to be solved. Her silence was suffocating. He was desperate for answers, yet he had no idea how to ask the right questions. "What is happening?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. Aliana finally moved, slowly, with an almost ethereal grace. She reached out and touched the object he held in his hand, the strange, glowing piece of technology. A surge of energy flowed through him, and he almost dropped it. The warmth that had previously been a faint sensation now burned through his fingers, coursing through his veins. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before, like a force that wasn't just physical, but mental, too. The walls around him seemed to shimmer, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw the room distort, as though it were no longer quite real. Aliana's eyes remained locked on him, her calm gaze unyielding. Then, for the first time since their meeting, she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost musical, but there was an undeniable strength behind it. "You have been chosen," she said, her words sending a strange ripple through the air. "This device, it is not just a gift. It is a key. A key to a future you cannot yet understand." James stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. A future he couldn't understand. What was she talking about? A key to what? He managed to ask, barely able to keep the confusion out of his voice. Aliana stepped back, her gaze never leaving his. She seemed to be calculating something, as though deciding how much to Reveal. To the truth, she replied simply. The truth about your world, about me, about everything. But you are not ready to see it yet. Not yet. James was about to ask more, but the room suddenly seemed to shift again. The strange hum filled the air once more, louder this time, almost vibrating through his bones. Aliana's form flickered for a fraction of a second, like a hologram struggling to stay in place. Then, she was solid again, standing before him with the same implacable calm. What do you mean? James asked, his voice now tinged with panic. He couldn't process what was happening. Nothing made sense anymore. Aliana held up her hand, and the noise in the room seemed to quiet, the pressure lifting for just a moment. You will understand soon, she said, her tone not quite reassuring but somehow comforting. But first, you must trust me. This is the beginning of something much larger than either of us. Your life will never be the same after this. James felt his head spinning. He had always thought of his life as ordinary, simple, almost insignificant. Now, here he was, standing in a room with an alien woman who claimed to be part of something much bigger, something that could change everything he had ever known. Trust you? James repeated, almost as if testing the words. How can I trust you when I don't even know who you really are? Aliana didn't answer right away. She simply studied him, her gaze unwavering, as though searching for something in him. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. I am not who you think I am, she said softly, her voice laced with a quiet intensity. And neither are you. James felt a shiver run through him. What did she mean by that? What could she possibly know about him that he didn't already know himself? He wanted to ask more, but the words stuck in his throat. The tension in the room was palpable, as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Finally, Aliana took a step back, as if giving him space to process everything that had just been said. You will learn everything in time, she said. But for now, know this, your journey has only just begun. James stood there, still holding the glowing device, trying to process everything Aliana had said. Her words echoed in his mind, you are not who you think you are. What did she mean by that? How could she possibly know anything about him? He had lived his entire life believing he was just another average person, a man with no real purpose or destiny. Yet here he was, standing in a room with an alien who claimed that everything he thought he knew was wrong. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. James tried to shake off the unease that had settled in his chest, but it wasn't easy. Every time he looked at Aliana, he felt as if he was looking at something far beyond his understanding, something he wasn't prepared to confront. She had an air of knowing, a quiet certainty about her that made him feel small in comparison. After a long silence, James finally managed to speak. What am I supposed to do now? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Aliana's gaze softened, but her expression remained just as unreadable as before. You are already doing it, she replied. You are here, and that is the first step. James frowned, not fully understanding. That doesn't explain anything, he said, his frustration starting to build. What do you mean by a journey? And why me? Why am I involved in all of this? Aliana stepped closer to him, her movements slow and deliberate. You are involved because you have been chosen, she said simply. You may not understand it now, but everything that has happened so far was meant to bring you to this moment. James shook his head, disbelief written across his face. Chosen for what? He asked, his voice tinged with desperation. To be part of something much larger than you can comprehend, she replied, her tone calm but firm. Your life is not as ordinary as you think. There is a reason you are here, with me. James felt a chill run down his spine at her words. A reason? He repeated, trying to make sense of what she was saying. What kind of reason? Aliana didn't immediately answer. Instead, she reached for the device in his hand, her fingers brushing against his briefly. The touch sent a jolt of energy through him, and he couldn't help but flinch. This device is more than just a key, she said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. It is a tool, one that will help you unlock the truth about your past. About who you really are. James's heart began to race. My past? He asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Aliana nodded. Yes. Your past, your family, your lineage. You are not the first person from your world to be involved in this. You have ancestors who were part of something far greater than anything Earth has ever known. The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. His mind raced, but he couldn't keep up. His entire life, everything he had known, was suddenly being called into question. Was it possible? Could he really be connected to something beyond Earth? To a legacy that spanned the stars? What does this have to do with you? James finally asked, his voice shaky. You, Aliana began, her eyes locking onto his, are not the only one with a hidden past. I am not who I appear to be either. My purpose here is tied to you, and it always has been. Your journey is mine, and my journey is yours. The silence between them grew, filled only by the hum of the energy in the room. James couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this encounter, was a turning point. A point of no return. Whatever was coming next, he knew it would change everything. But the questions piled up in his mind, faster than he could process them. Who was Aliana really? What did she mean by their journey? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do with the strange device now resting in his hand? Aliana seemed to sense his confusion, and her voice softened. You will understand soon enough, she said, almost as if reassuring him. But for now, we have to move forward. The truth is waiting, and you are ready to find it. James swallowed hard, still trying to wrap his mind around everything that was happening. His life had just become something he couldn't even begin to comprehend. And there was no turning back now. James felt his mind spinning, trying to catch up with everything Aliana had just said. The weight of her words settled heavily in his chest, and a wave of disbelief washed over him. Was it possible? Was he really part of something much bigger than Earth, tied to a legacy he never even knew existed? Aliana's calm demeanor only made it worse. She stood there, waiting, as though she knew exactly what he was thinking, as though she had all the answers to the questions that were crowding his mind. But her silence only deepened the mystery. I don't understand, James said, his voice barely above a whisper. You keep talking about a journey, about the truth. But what is the truth? What am I supposed to be doing? Aliana's gaze softened slightly, and she stepped closer to him, the distance between them narrowing. The truth is not something you can learn all at once, James, she said, her voice as gentle as it was firm. It is something that must unfold in its own time. You will understand when the time is right. James shook his head, frustration building. I don't have time. What am I supposed to do with this device? With you? Aliana's eyes flickered with something, concern, maybe, but it was gone almost as quickly as it had appeared. She reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly warm. You are not alone in this, James. The device is just the beginning. It will guide you, but you must be willing to listen to it. Trust that it will show you the way. James looked down at the glowing object in his hand, his mind still reeling. I don't know how to trust any of this, he muttered. I don't even know who you are. Who I am is complicated, Aliana replied softly. But who you are is even more so. Her words were cryptic, but they hung in the air like an unspoken promise. James didn't know what to make of her, or the strange feelings she stirred in him. All he knew was that his life, the life he had always known, was slipping away, replaced by something completely foreign. He had been thrust into this world, into this strange reality, and now there was no going back. He looked up at her, his gaze filled with both confusion and determination. If I'm going to do this, he said slowly, I need to know everything. I need to know who I really am, and what I'm supposed to do. Eliana didn't answer immediately. Instead, she seemed to consider his words, as though weighing the implications of what she was about to say. Finally, she nodded. "Very well," she said. "But know this, once you begin, there is no turning back. This journey will change everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world you live in. Are you ready for that?" James took a deep breath, his mind a whirlwind of uncertainty. But beneath it all, there was a spark, a curiosity that had been ignited the moment he had met Eliana. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear, he couldn't walk away now. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Eliana gave him a small, knowing smile. "Good. Then let's begin." As she spoke, the room around them seemed to shift, the walls vibrating with a low hum. The device in James's hand pulsed with light, and for the first time, he felt the unmistakable sensation that something extraordinary was about to happen. The path ahead was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure, his life would never be the same again. James felt the tension in the air as Eliana's words sank in. The room around them seemed to pulse with energy, and the strange device in his hand continued to glow softly, its light flickering like a heartbeat. He had made a decision. There was no turning back now. He had chosen to embark on this journey, whatever it was, and there was a part of him that knew it was the only way forward. Eliana watched him silently, her gaze intense, as if she were waiting for him to take the first step. "What do I do next?" he asked, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. Eliana took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving his. "Follow the path," she said simply. "The device will guide you, but you must trust it. And you must trust me." James nodded, though part of him still felt uncertain. What did she mean by the path? How could a small, glowing device possibly lead him to the truth about his past, his family, and whatever it was that Eliana was involved in? But even in his doubt, there was a sense of curiosity, of something deep within him urging him forward. He had always felt like there was more to his life than the ordinary existence he had known. Now, it seemed that he was about to uncover it.
He glanced down at the device. And as if on cue, it pulsed brighter, almost as though it was responding to his thoughts. James hesitated for a moment, then pressed the device in his hand. The world around him seemed to shift instantly, the walls of the room dissolving into a blur of light. He blinked, disoriented, but when his vision cleared, he found himself standing in a completely different place. Gone was the small, dimly lit room. Instead, he was standing in a vast, open space, filled with strange structures that defied his understanding. The sky above was not the familiar blue he knew, but a swirling mix of colors, as though the very atmosphere was alive. The air was thick with a sense of awe and wonder, and James couldn't help but feel both terrified and exhilarated. He looked around, trying to make sense of where he was, but the landscape seemed to stretch on endlessly. Eliana was standing beside him, as if nothing had changed. "What is this place?" James asked, his voice filled with awe. Eliana's expression softened, a hint of something deeper in her eyes. "This is one of the places you will come to understand in time," she replied. "It is a reflection of what has been and what is yet to come. A place where you will learn who you really are." James swallowed hard, trying to process everything. He had never imagined anything like this. It felt like he had stepped into another world, another reality entirely. But even as the overwhelming beauty of the place filled his senses, he couldn't help but wonder what it all meant. "This is my future?" he asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Eliana nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It is part of your future," she said. "But to understand it, you must first understand the past." James felt a deep sense of unease settle in his chest. The past. What could that possibly have to do with him? "My past?" he repeated, his voice shaky. "What do you mean?" Eliana didn't immediately respond. Instead, She turned to face him fully. Her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. Everything you have been told is a lie, she said. Her voice low but clear. You are not just some ordinary person. You have a history. A legacy that goes far beyond anything you could have imagined. James felt his heart race again. His mind reeling. He wanted to ask more. To demand answers. But something in Aliana's gaze held him back. She was waiting for him to make the next move. The next decision. But why me? James finally asked. His voice hoarse. Why am I the one who has to do this? Aliana's expression softened. And for a moment, she looked almost compassionate. Because you were chosen, she said simply. And because you are ready. It's time to learn the truth. James. The truth about who you are. And who you were always meant to be. The weight of her words hit him harder than he had expected. It was as if the foundation of his entire life had just been shattered. Replaced with something so much bigger. So much more complicated. But there was no turning back now. James looked at Aliana. His eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. What do I need to do? He asked. The words almost a plea. Aliana gave him a small, reassuring smile. Follow the device, she said. It will show you the way. And together, we will uncover the truth. James felt a mixture of awe and confusion as Aliana's words echoed in his mind. Everything you have been told is a lie, she had said. He had never considered that his life, the one he thought was so ordinary, could be a lie. Everything he knew, every little detail of his existence, seemed to be unraveling before him. As he stood in this strange, otherworldly place, the weight of the truth he was being forced to confront felt unbearable. The device in his hand pulsed once again, its soft glow beckoning him to trust it, to follow it. He looked at Aliana, her expression still calm but now carrying an unspoken urgency. What does this place really mean? He asked, his voice filled with both curiosity and fear. Aliana turned toward him, her eyes softening slightly as she seemed to sense his inner turmoil. This is just the beginning. James, she replied. You are standing in a place that exists outside the boundaries of your world. A place that holds the key to unlocking your past. Your true identity. James felt a chill run through him. He had never believed in anything like this. Never thought there could be a hidden history. Some great purpose behind his life. Why me? He asked again, his voice rough. Why am I the one who gets dragged into this? What makes me so special? Aliana didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch warm, comforting. Because you were chosen, James. You are part of something much larger than you can comprehend right now. The words didn't reassure him. In fact, they only deepened his confusion. He had never asked for any of this. He had never wanted to be special. He had just wanted to live a quiet, simple life. And now, standing in a place he couldn't even begin to understand, his world had been turned upside down. The device in his hand began to pulse more urgently. As though sensing his hesitation, Aliana looked at him intently. The device is a key. James, she said softly. It will show you the way. But you have to be ready to see it. You have to be ready to face the truth. James's heart was pounding now. He had no idea what the truth was. But somehow, deep down, he felt a growing certainty that he couldn't turn back. Whatever this journey was, whatever was waiting for him, he had to go through with it. How do I start? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Aliana stepped back, her eyes never leaving his. You start by trusting it, she said, gesturing to the device. Trust the path it shows you. Even when it seems impossible. Trust that it will lead you to what you need to know. James took a deep breath. He didn't know what to expect. But something inside him urged him to take the next step. He had come this far. And there was no turning back. He raised the device, and the moment his fingers touched it, the world around him seemed to shift again. The colors in the sky deepened, swirling like a cosmic storm. The ground beneath him seemed to ripple, as though the very fabric of reality was bending to the device's power. For a brief moment, he felt weightless, as if he were floating in space, surrounded by stars and galaxies. Then, the sensation passed, and he was standing in a new place. The landscape around him was different, yet somehow familiar, as though it were a vision of a past life. Aliana was beside him again, her gaze steady and unwavering. "This is your past, James," she said softly. "This is where it all began." James's breath caught in his throat as he took in the scene around him. The structures, the people, the environment, they were unlike anything he had ever seen. It was as if he had stepped into another time, another reality altogether. But the more he looked, the more he felt a strange connection to it. It was as if he had been here before. It was both alien and oddly familiar. A place that felt like home but also like a distant dream. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. Aliana's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something deeper in them. Regret, maybe, or sorrow. "This is where your journey begins, James," she said softly. "This is where your true path was set in motion. And now, it is time for you to remember." James's mind raced as the weight of her words settled in. His journey? His true path? He still didn't understand what any of this meant. But one thing was clear. He had no choice but to follow wherever it led. James stood in awe, his mind struggling to comprehend the scene around him. The landscape was both alien and hauntingly familiar, like a place that had been buried deep in his subconscious for years. He had no idea what was happening or where this journey was taking him. But something in his gut told him that he was on the verge of discovering something monumental. Something that would change everything he thought he knew about himself. "This is where it all began," Aliana's voice echoed in his mind. Her words seemed to reverberate off the strange structures in front of them, as though the entire world was speaking to him, urging him to understand. He turned to her, trying to make sense of it all. "But what does this mean?" he asked, his voice shaky. "How is this my past? I don't remember any of this." Aliana's gaze softened as she studied him. Her eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and something deeper. Something that hinted at the gravity of what he was about to learn. "Your memory has been altered, James," she said gently. "The life you remember, the world you've known, is not the full truth. You were born into something much larger, and your past has been hidden from you for a reason." James felt his heart race. Hidden? What did she mean by that? He had lived his whole life as an ordinary person. He had no reason to believe anything was amiss. But now, standing here, surrounded by this alien world, his sense of reality was beginning to crack. "Why was it hidden?" he asked, the question tumbling out before he could stop it. "And why am I the one who has to uncover all of this?" Aliana took a deep breath and stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Because you are the key, James," she said softly. "You are the one who has the power to unlock what has been sealed away. The legacy that has been passed down to you is not just a story of your family. It is the story of an entire world, of a civilization that once thrived, but has since been lost to time." James felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had always been just an ordinary guy. He had never imagined that his life, his existence, could be tied to something so grand, so far-reaching. "What do you mean? The key?" he asked, struggling to wrap his mind around the implications. Aliana glanced around at the surroundings, her expression shifting as if she were preparing herself to reveal something truly monumental. "You are not who you think you are," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You are the descendant of a long-forgotten race. One that was once at the heart of a powerful intergalactic alliance. And now, you are the last living member of that lineage. James stood frozen. A descendant of an ancient race? The last member of some powerful alliance? It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel. Not the life he had known. He could feel the weight of her words pressing on him. Like a 1,000-pound weight on his chest. He had no idea what he was supposed to do with this knowledge, or what his role was in this vast, unknown world Aliana was hinting at. Aliana's eyes softened, sensing the confusion and fear that was swirling inside him. I know this is hard to understand, James, she said, her voice gentle, but this is the truth. The legacy you carry is not just a part of your past. It is your future. You have a role to play in the events to come, whether you want to or not. James shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. I can't. I don't understand any of this, he stammered. I'm just a regular guy. This isn't real. Aliana reached out and placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. It is real, James. And it is happening now. She gestured to the world around them. The alien landscape stretching out before them like a canvas waiting to be painted with the story of his future. The device you carry will show you the way forward. It will guide you through the steps you need to take to unlock your past, to awaken the power that lies dormant within you. James stared at the device in his hand. It pulsed softly, its light growing brighter with every beat. He could feel something inside him responding to it, as if the device was alive, waiting for him to make his next move. His mind raced with questions. But beneath the confusion, there was a spark of curiosity. A spark that told him he couldn't back away now. Whatever lay ahead, whatever this journey was, he had to see it through. What happens if I don't? He asked, his voice uncertain. Aliana's gaze turned serious. Then the truth will remain locked away, she said. And you will never understand the full scope of who you really are. You will never know the legacy you were born into. James's heart pounded in his chest. The decision before him was clear. There was no going back now. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the device in his hand. It was time to uncover the truth. It was time to begin the journey. The path was waiting, and he had no choice but to walk it. James felt the weight of the device in his hand grow heavier with every step he took forward. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, its light brighter now, urging him to move, to keep going. Aliana's words echoed in his mind. The truth will remain locked away. The thought of that kept him moving. He couldn't afford to turn back. Not now. Not when the answers were just within his reach. He glanced at Aliana, her face unreadable, her expression the same calm yet resolute demeanor she had shown since they arrived. How do I unlock it? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Aliana's eyes locked onto his, her gaze unwavering. You already are, she replied. The device will react to your intentions. Your true self, the one you've forgotten, will guide you. Trust it, and trust yourself. James hesitated for a moment, staring at the device. It seemed impossible that something so small, so unassuming, could hold the key to everything he had been searching for. But there was a part of him, a deep, unshakable feeling, that told him this was it. This was what he was meant to do. With a deep breath, James closed his eyes for a moment and steadied his thoughts. He focused on the strange sensations coursing through him. The pull of the device. The energy that seemed to connect him to everything around him. He didn't know how to explain it, but he felt as though the device was more than just an object. It was a part of him. A part of who he truly was. Slowly, cautiously, he raised the device and pressed it against his chest the instant his skin made contact with it. The world around him seemed to shift. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and the air grew thick with energy. It felt like everything was vibrating, as if the universe itself were reacting to his touch. James opened his eyes, and the scene before him was no longer the alien landscape he had come to know. Instead, the world was a blur of images, flashes of memories, places he had never seen, people he had never met, but all of it felt familiar, as though he had lived it before. The memories were fragments, disconnected, but they were there, fragments of a past life, fragments of a story that had been buried deep within him. He saw glimpses of a civilization, one far more advanced than anything on Earth, a world where technology and nature existed in harmony, where power and peace coexisted. He saw faces, some strange, some familiar, gazing at him with a mix of reverence and sorrow. And then, he saw it, a figure, standing tall and regal, surrounded by symbols he couldn't understand. The figure's face was obscured, but there was no mistaking the aura of power that radiated from them. James felt a jolt in his chest. This was it. This was the moment. The memories were flooding back, faster now, each one more vivid than the last. He remembered the alliance, the long-forgotten legacy, the power that had been passed down through generations. He remembered the weight of the responsibility that came with it. And then he remembered the fall, the destruction of it all, the shattering of the world he had once known. The memories stopped, and the world around him returned to its previous state. The device in his hand was still pulsing, its light now steady, calm. James staggered back, overwhelmed by the flood of information. It was all too much. Too fast. He could barely process it. But there was no denying it. Everything he had seen, everything he had felt, was real. It was his past, his legacy. I remember, he said, his voice trembling with the weight of it. Aliana nodded, her expression unchanged. You are beginning to remember, James, she said softly. The truth is within you. You just needed to unlock it. James took another step back, still trying to absorb everything. The world around him felt different now, as though it had shifted with the unveiling of his memories. His life, everything he had known, had just been rewritten. And yet, despite the overwhelming flood of knowledge, there was a part of him that felt more certain than ever. He wasn't just some ordinary man. He had a purpose, a destiny. He was part of something far greater than anything he had imagined. And now, the journey was just beginning. What do I do now? He asked, his voice steadier now, though the uncertainty was still there. Aliana's eyes softened, and for the first time, she smiled. Now, you continue, she said. Now, you embrace your true path. James looked down at the device once more. The glow had dimmed, but its presence was undeniable. It was time to move forward. The truth had been unlocked, and now it was up to him to decide what to do with it. There was no going back. The path ahead was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face it.